Two, we go. Awesome. Thank you all for coming. My name is Evans. I'm the president of Peninsula Society and Community. And I want to officially welcome you to the Principal View Student Special. Sue assumed office in 2025, and she's held a couple of Principal View to be able to communicate with the university leadership team around the university's strategic leadership and all of that. And I think it's really important for us to be able to also get opportunity to be able to be part of that conversation. And that's the reason why we have today. And so I'm going to welcome Sue to kick off with that. But we already do have questions that we've received that we're going to ask. And then if you're online here, you also get opportunity to ask questions. And so we'll just kick it off right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I need your mic as well?
No.
Great. Thanks for coming, folks. See this as the start of an engagement. If I get slides wrong and you're bored, let me know and I'll get more exciting ones next time. If you would like to meet other members of the senior team, just let me know and we can make this a rolling event if that's handy. Or if you think, crikey, once is enough in a lifetime to listen to this, then let us know and we'll do other things. The intent, and one of the questions you asked was, how do we communicate better between a senior leadership team and students? And I'd see this as the beginnings of that intent. We've also been working with our comms team and ENSA's comms team to see how we can pull together better comms. And of course, your ENSA sabbaticals sit on my court, so they are in a way my boss. So there is a very direct communication with the student body through that. But I completely accept two things. One is that no comms is ever good enough. And two, that too much comms is as bad as too little because you stop reading it. So there's a work in progress to do to find that out. Just like there's a work in progress to find out how I do things.
No.
Magic. I might need you to do that again. So many buttons got pressed then in such a short period of time. I thought it'd be useful to talk about the university review. That's where we've been dropping our costs because we couldn't afford not to. I thought it was worth looking briefly at the external landscape. We all know what's going on, but thinking about it from the lens of the university might be useful. Going forward, we're just at the point of kicking off the development of our new strategy, and I wanted to take this opportunity to engage you as a student body in that development of a strategy. I wanted to talk to the proposal to revise our school structures. I wanted to end with celebrating success. I want to do all of that in about 15 minutes, so we have 15 minutes for questions. So I'm going to run at speed. Where I start the staff principals view is always with this slide, which on the one hand is really, really boring, but on the other hand is the core of what we do, and that's our balance sheet. So the income that we get is about 48% from the Scottish Government, and it's about 52% from other sources. Some of that's accommodation, some of it's international work, some of it's work overseas, research, knowledge exchange. And overall, in last year, we had an income of about £156 million. This year, we hoped it would be up to about 164. But our outgoings are bigger than that. And the biggest outgoing that you can see there is pay costs. So one of your questions was, what do we spend your money on? 68% of it last year went on staff salaries. That's a really tricky thing because we don't pay our staff enough. It's a collective bargaining. So all universities agree the same pay spikes, but we would all like to pay more. But given that the income from the Scottish Government has been largely fixed since 2014, it's quite difficult. So 68% of the money goes on staff, and the other 50-odd% goes on the buildings, the digital estate, Moodle, student record system, and the administration of those systems and support for really vital services like student support and ENSA. This is it was atypical for the sector. Generally, about 60% of a university's costs go on staff. And what this reflected was a few years ago, we really invested in more staff, expecting that we would grow our student numbers to match, and then didn't for a variety of external reasons, not least the fact that Russia invaded Ukraine. So what you can see at the bottom of this slide is that in 23-24, we just about made a surplus. This is not about profit. So I'm not trying to run the university to make a whopping great profit, but if I make a loss year after year, I use the reserves of the university and then we go broke. So I need a balance, and ideally I want a little bit spare at the end of the year to put away so that in the next 6 to 8 years we can either do up this site at Merchiston or move out to a purpose-built site, because this building is at end of life. And building costs at the moment mean that we're going to need about 200 million to do that. So ideally I would build that up a bit year on year. What you can see is that in 24/5 we delivered an operating deficit of 2.5 million. Now, what's in the middle of this slide is a thing called EBITDA, and that's actually a better measure of performance in lots of ways, because it's how much the university earns before things we can't control, like amortization and the way that buildings depreciate and pensions and all that kind of stuff. That's beyond our control, but the EBITDA number isn't. And as long as the EBITDA is positive, we'd be confident that we're a going concern. But what you can see is that EBITDA going down from 14 million 4 years ago to 2 million. And then this year, when we presented our budget to court, we were assuming that our EBITDA would be negative and we'd be about 5.7 million pounds in deficit. And that's the basis on which we realised that we had to cut staff costs. Thank you. So we undertook this through something called a university review. So we got a quantitative and a qualitative analysis of all the teaching and research that we do. And we worked out where there were more staff than we would expect as a university average. And then we tried to see where we could lose some staff, because so much of our expenditure is pay that we couldn't just keep dropping the non-pay costs. We had to make some compromises as we did that, but I think very few. So we've decided to teach out one master's programme at Side Hill, but otherwise we haven't cut the offer of courses at all. We haven't reduced the number of modules or the number of qualifications that we offer. And we haven't dropped anybody down below a staff level that's around the sort of median for the sector. We haven't made any changes to staff contracts. So there is, I think, a degree of perception that staff are more vulnerable than they were before, but their contracts are just as secure as they've ever been. And we've been working very closely with union colleagues to mitigate this impact. Most people left voluntarily. A small number were reluctant to do that, and we're still working through looking for redeployment opportunities. And as we sit today, there are 3 staff who haven't redeployed, but we know 2 jobs are being advertised next week. So this has been a long and not painless process. And it's also, of course, affected you through the strikes, which I'm completely at ease. Everyone has a right to strike, and we as a senior management team need to be very responsive when staff respond in that manner. What I did want to do was put this in context. This isn't to either apologise or ameliorate, but if you look at the universities in Scotland and you look at the number of jobs that require to be lost, it ranges from about 1,400 at the University of Edinburgh down to 41 at the University of Aberdeen. We were losing around 58. And that's quite a high-risk strategy for the university, because what it depended on was to be able to grow our income at the same time as dropping our costs. And what more conservative universities have done, particularly like University of Dundee, is say we've got to lose so many staff that we can carry on as a viable concern without growing our business at all, because you don't know that you'll be able to grow. And that's why so many more staff have been lost across almost the rest of the sector. We accept that this is unfortunate. There's one story that says it's because people like me do a bad job, and there are cases where that's true. There's also a case to be made for saying the Scottish Government hasn't actually paid us any more for the last 12 years. And in the end, you can't sustain that. But if I just go back to the money slide, what you can see is that we were guessing we would have an income this year of about 164 million. Actually, it's nearer 169, so 168.4. I won't round that up, it's me. And that's really handy because it shows that that growth strategy is working. And that means that we can develop a bit more of a cushion. And that should mean that staff jobs are safe going forward. So going back, one more. Thank you. So I just wanted to highlight that we're very aware of the industrial action, and we're aware that it's affected some of you. It's very patchy across the university because huge areas of the university didn't strike, but small areas went on strike action for the whole 10 days. And if the union decide to go back and have another 15 days because we still have 3 people that we're trying to sort out, then it will be in those patches where the influence is greatest. But at its peak, we had about 14% of staff on strike. And by the end, that had gone to less than 10. So the vast majority of teaching was delivered. But where it wasn't delivered was patchy. And what we've done is make sure that nobody will be academically disadvantaged by the strikes. That's not to say there isn't a loss of learning, but there'll be no loss of marks or output. So your learning will be just as deep. It won't be quite as broad as it might have been, but we won't assess on anything that you weren't taught. And all the teaching, of course, is available online. So you can pick up the stuff that was lost, but you won't be assessed on it. I know that a lot of academics actively took steps to strike on days where they didn't teach. And what I've done is try to recognise that by reaching out to the unions and being as responsive as we possibly can be to that issue. But we are aware that this has been a really difficult time for everybody. So we're growing, and that means that our staff base is secure. We'll make a whopping great deficit this year because we've paid off the staff who chose to leave voluntarily. And next year we'll make a small surplus again. But then we're really exposed to external events. The biggest of those, and I won't go through all of these, the biggest of those is, of course, Trump's not war against Iran, which has closed the Straits of Hormuz, which sounds like it's a long way away, but you can already see the impact on fuel costs, energy costs. That will go through to food costs. I'd really appreciate you as students, but very much so ENSA, thinking about how next year, when that really starts to hit, we can help as a university to mitigate that. And I don't know if we have to go back to free breakfasts or food banks or whatever, but it'd be really useful to have a think, because I think this is here for a while. But more particularly, a lot of our international students transit through the Middle East as they come and go. And that means at the moment that route is more or less shut. And I am very worried that next year we'll have much lower income at the end of the year. And there's nothing we can do about that. And that's the point where I would use university reserves to buffer us through, because I don't think they'll last too long. What else am I worried about? Immigration. This is not devolved, so it's a Westminster issue. The Westminster government is reacting to a right-wing agenda by saying that they don't want students to study here. I deprecate that. I think students from all over the world benefit from learning here, but they also add benefit by learning here. But the government doesn't agree with that at the moment. In terms of the Scottish environment, elections are on the 7th of May. Please vote. Please don't vote reform. I'm not trying to tell you what to do with your lives, but it would just help. You can't have Lord Offord ending up as First Minister of Scotland, just unthinkable. Broadly, the Holyrood government has fiddled with student finances, so they gave us a 3.4 uplift this year, which would have been just above inflation, but is now going to be just below inflation. But they won't do that again because they only do that in election years. And we're trying to find a way to sustainably fund universities, but it's hard. And in England, where research is actually administered, we've got a complete, no, I can't say nutter, that's not fair. Somebody who's very clear that only research-intensive universities should conduct research, and they should get fewer, longer grants that are aligned to the English economy. Go figure. So what we're doing? What we're doing is trying to get as resilient as we can, because I can't do anything about Trump and I can't even do anything about Surrey and Chatham, but I can make sure that the university is as resilient as it can be. So one of the things that we're kicking off is our new strategy, and we would very much appreciate your input into that. It will ideally be finalised in October, and I know many students will take some of the summer doing other things, but we'll make sure there's lots of opportunities online or in person to be involved in that. What we're thinking is to simplify what we're aiming to do into something like these 3 bullet points. So we want to challenge ourselves to say every one of our qualifications should change lives. You should never leave the university thinking, well, that was nice, but what do I do next? You should think, that was life-changing and I have 3 job offers, but maybe I want to do a master's. So that's really hard for us, but because we've got Fiona and the career service really aligned to this, we've got a kickstart, but it's going to ask a lot of us in the next 10 years because AI is going to change what a job means. And one of the things we want to do is bring in some expertise around that. We want to do research that matters to people. So that's not just saying it should be grad grind useful. It might be really esoteric, really wild, but you should be able to explain why it's worth giving you grant money to do it. So a really good example would be we hold the Jazz Archive for Scotland. That's really important. It matters to people because jazz in Scotland has taken a unique pathway of musical development, and we're the only people holding that history and then being able to share it with people. So it's not just about medicine or applied science or engineering, but your research has to matter. And then partnerships externally that grow the economy, because broadly Scotland has no money because the economy is stagnant. If we can grow it in a fair and green way, then there'll be more money out there that we could be given if people loved us. So we'll involve you in that. And then the next thing is just to say, we're restructuring the schools. So we're going to, nothing happens if you're at the business school, that stays as it is now. And it's already led by a vice principal with a university-wide role for business engagement. But here at Merchiston, we're going to pull together Skibby and Saki, not quickly, but over the next 18 to 24 months under one vice principal. And they'll have a university role in looking at AI and creativity. That is looking at what the future of your degrees are when AI can do all the bits you do on Moodle at the moment, but it still can't do the things you do in your head. And it's amplifying that so that they become the learning outcomes for modules rather than knowing stuff that actually AI can know better. And then at Side Hill, we'll pull together applied sciences and health with a vice principal with a university-wide role for health, because one of the other real challenges in Scotland is that we have a really unhealthy population. And the more healthy we are, the less demand there is on the health service, but also the more the economy can grow. So that's the change. Initially, it will just be a change of senior leadership, and for most of you, you'll finish your degrees without noticing any change. But within 2 years, what I'd like is that academics have had a think, pull themselves together, probably into slightly bigger academic units. We'll go back to calling them departments. And the idea would be that they are a little bit more resilient than they are now. Because at the moment, we have 56 academic units and 900 staff. So people are really kind of pocketed. And we have bureaucracy over every single pocket. And the people doing the bureaucracy can't do learning and teaching or research. So we'll simplify, get rid of some silos and get rid of the bureaucracy that academics hate. That's the hope. Next slide. Finally, because we've taken this difficult decision to reduce pay costs, but not because of that, we have the agency to start to do some of the upgrades to the place that we know that we need to do. So over the next 3 years, we'll develop a new website because we all hate the website, but it actually is rubbish as well as we think it is. We're going to replace all the campus screens that went black a few weeks ago, and we'll put a brand new piece of kit and software in each of those places. We're improving the AV kit because we realised it was maybe a bit of an ask to ask academics to teach in rooms that didn't have any AV that worked. And in the background, we're replacing some of our legacy systems. So I wouldn't expect you to be delighted by the idea that our HR system is being upgraded, but what comes next will be a whole sequence of more student-facing pieces of kit. They hopefully make it cheaper to run our back office services. And they are aimed to support you as students, staff and applicants as they move through that engagement with the institution. And then finally, I wanted to just celebrate some successes. It's been a really hard year for the institution, and it's easy to think that we're quite dowdy, but actually folk in creative writing have been selling their brilliant books. We've got people in creative digital winning national and international awards for the innovation of their digital work. We have folk like Peter Barlow on the bottom left, who's bringing in enormous grants to do work on viruses and immunosuppressant work. And some of our spin-outs are doing very well. And the example I chose was Celtic Renewables, which is based at Grangemouth. It makes fuel out of pot ale, which is what's left when you finish making whiskey. And they've just got £16 million to expand their business. So we're going great guns, but it has been a hard semester. And by Easter, we're all knackered. But I really just wanted to highlight that. And then I also wanted to welcome the next sabbaticals. We've really enjoyed working with Evans and Chika. We'll look forward to carrying on working with Austin. And I'm really looking forward to working with Amika and Blessing going forward. And then I stop so you can ask some questions. But I put the questions that had already been left on this slide, partly because we're not going to get through all of them, but partly because I thought it was useful for you to be able to see them. So that's me. What would you like to ask or say?
Awesome. Thank you so much. And before we even get to the questions, I know for sure that without the war escalating, the breakfast for the next academic year will be all of us. I'm not lying. All right, great. So let's go straight into the question. And the first question we do have is, have you ever tried the food served at Napier? The variety is poor, the quality is even worse, and the prices are outrageous for what you get. The food served also show no understanding of the student demographics or the international population.
Yeah, I eat it quite often and I don't disagree with that. Having said that, I think our catering staff are brilliant. And if you ever need a lift and if you ever need somebody who cares about you, you go and buy some food. And sometimes the food's delicious. There was chili here yesterday. It was bloody great, but it's a bit variable. But the staff are fabulous. So I think we've got to caveat this. At Craig Lockhart, where the majority of our international students are, we are very international in the cuisine we offer, but we know we could do better. What we've been talking about a little bit is, would ENSA like to run our catering for us? And we'd be very open to that. There was a later question about why don't we have a bar or why don't we have sort of social spaces? I would have no problem at all with you coming forward with a request to do that. And we've got a great big canteen down here that we could use for multiple purposes. But I have to confess that over the last year, we've had more to worry about than food.
Great. Before we get to the next questions, do we have anybody here who has any question? And Daniel, do we have some questions online as well?
How is sort of, do those numbers include research funding, and if so, how is that separated from student funding and how that works?
Yeah, so those numbers counted research income, knowledge exchange income, and the income we get from working with businesses. Research is a tricky one because it comes in so that academics can do work and it goes straight out again. So although it counts on the bottom line, it can't make a profit. For most charities, we make a loss of about 30% of the grant as a whole because we can't charge for peripherals like library, energy, and sometimes not staff costs either. But for research, so for UKRI grants, we can charge what's called full economic costing. So it's there in the bottom line and it's there as an input that isn't divided into sort of students or other. But for simplicity in this, it's all mushed together.
Thanks. So you talked a little bit about the strategy going forward, the need to align with things that perhaps wider society values. I'm just wondering where that leaves us in terms of, say, the cultural aspect and the creative industries.
Yeah, well, that's why I chose the example of the Jazz Archive as a really good piece of research that we care about, but is a cultural asset. So societies need culture. Arguably, they need it more than almost anything else. And where it gets too attenuated, cultures weaken and society can't withstand challenge. I mean, I would say Trump is the far end of what happens then. If you're totally uncultured and you're given too much power, that's the chaos that ensues. So it's no challenge to the creative industries here. It's just a challenge to say, is what you do explicable? And if I give an example, I used to work on 500 million-year-old plankton. And I struggled to say why that mattered. But at the time, I was working at the University of Edinburgh and I could publish in the best ranking journals and get in income. But 30 years on, I don't think that that's a piece of research that we could really justify. But I think we absolutely could justify a whole range of things. It's just, my challenge would be, if you're in a lift with a funder, could you explain it by the time you got to the top of the shaft in such a way that they would maybe give us money?
Right. The next question here says, what work is being done to improve the experiences of disabled students? Example, learning profiles, campus accessibility, staff understanding, constituency of quality. So I'm really lucky because the person who looks after all this for me is Mark Wilkinson, and he's been around the sector and sector leading in this stuff for as long as I've been. Not that he's old or anything, but certainly 35 years of doing this. We have really good outcomes for students, but we could always do better. But what I was going to suggest was giving that question to him and getting him to post an answer, because it's in a sense more granular than I can easily see. Do you have any question online? Yeah.
I have a question here, which was submitted online. After the closure of the Sighthill campus because of the anti-immigrant and racist protest and the continuously unwelcoming environment for international people of colour in the Sighthill area, have there been any extra considerations to support international students and ensure their safety?
Thank you. That's a really good question. And yes, but again, I'm going to need ENSA's support to fully realise this. So the backstory is that somebody who came to live in Edinburgh about 4 years ago went on a rampage in the Calders with 2 knives. There was very big police response. Some people were injured. It wasn't too serious, but the police presence and the fact that he was wandering past schools and nurseries meant the whole thing got amplified. And residents then had a protest against what they perceived as immigrants coming into the area. Actually, this guy had been in the UK for many years, but it doesn't matter. We realised that that was happening, and we were warned by the police that there might be anti-racist demonstrations. So we closed Side Hill so that everybody could get home safely before that kicked off. And in actual fact, it wasn't that big a deal, but I'm really glad we did that. In response to that, we called what we call Gold Command. So the sort of senior team that get together when shit happens, broadly, and asked ourselves, and Evans is part of this, the questions, what do we need to do to make people feel safer? We've then extended that to asking students at Side Hill how they feel and how we could help, and we're doing the same with staff. And we've allocated a significant part of the student hardship fund if need be, so that if people say they would like alarms that they could raise, if they would like help to walk in pairs or groups or behavioural change, or indeed if we can extend security so that it goes off the premises as well. And that's all something that we're prepared to do. We also want to extend that thinking to the other 2 campuses, recognising that while it's less of a problem, it's still growing. I'm hopeful that the Side Hill piece was a peak and it will dip a bit, but I don't think it will dip sufficiently. And we've certainly had one actually white female student who was really intimidated by some white lads near Side Hill. So it's not just a racism issue, it's a social disparity issue, and we're looking to see what we can do. So we've asked Lothian Buses if they could reroute the buses to go past campus. They probably can't, but it's worth asking. We've made sure that we're extending security so it covers the periods of the evening where you're doing sport out at Side Hill, and we'll just carry on chewing away at this. I worry that there is a limit to my agency, because once you're off the premises, there's only so much that I can do. But working with ENSA, we can develop more sort of protocols, suggestions. You know, groups are very safe, individuals may not be. Groups will feel safe, individuals will not. And so we can develop some behavioural change as well. But we're putting efforts or money and listening into trying to find a solution to this.
Thank you. The next question here says, how can the experiences and employability prospect of online students be improved?
I will hand over to our expert, Fiona, who runs the career service.
Sorry. So the first thing I would say is that our online students can access everything that we provide our in-person students. And the gateway to that is the My Future platform that you can find on My Napier. So we're here, we're a service. We have lots of different facets to the employability and career service at Napier that a lot of students perhaps might not know about. But that gateway is very much your My Napier platform through which you can book an appointment, and you can book online appointments. Not everything has to be face-to-face. So we do accommodate both online students, wherever they may be, at whatever time zone they're in, and our in-person students as well.
Thank you. The next question here says, what are your thoughts on AI usage by staff and students, and will training on how to use AI be embedded into the curriculum for our students?
It's a really good question, and that's why we're bringing in somebody to look after this campus that has a university-wide reach to do that. I think a lot of amateurs are playing in this at the moment, and I think we're oscillating between thinking it's the devil incarnate, you must use it, to actually not recognising that this is a tool. It's not actually likely going to take over the world, though it might. More likely it will be with you when you enter the workplace as an assistant. And if we don't master it as an assistant, it will master us. So I think we lack expertise to do this at the moment. That's why we're going to bring somebody, it might be somebody we're already employed, but bring someone who will focus on that as a major part of their day job. But I'm too old to deal with AI. I can break it in a sec. I asked AI to plot me out the campuses for colleges in Fife, and an hour later it couldn't. If AI ever takes over the world, they'll call for me and I'll be the like superhero no one ever expected.
Awesome. The next one is, what perception have been shared with you from students about the strikes, and how have that changed your thinking?
I really hoped we get to this question, and I'm conscious of time. It may be the last. I answered every email that came into either student complaints or to one of my senior staff or to me. I welcomed all of them. What did I learn? I welcomed the engagement of students with the university and with their staff. I welcomed the fact that those emails were well thought out, they were detailed, they were well argued, and they didn't descend into acrimony, which would have been really understandable had they done that. I really valued the fact that you had listened to your academics and you were reporting back to me things that you perceived to be happening. But I was also aware that there was a degree of disinformation that I'm sure was not intentional, that had crept into that. So I had students from areas that are completely unaffected by the pay reductions saying that they had fewer lecturers, don't. Students saying that their lecturers were now on precarious contracts and too worried to work, they're not. I had lots of complaints about how we were reducing the number of modules or courses, we're not. So I think what I learned was that you really care, you're very articulate, you're very passionate, you're very interested in the world around you. And maybe as a university, we'd failed to put a counter argument. But what I didn't want to do with staff on strike was to make it look as if the university was arguing against its own staff, because I don't think that sets up a really good environment for the future.
Thank you. We know the time is up, but we want to take the last question.
Yeah, just one question. So you mentioned about growing partnerships. Is that about improving the career path for most students? Because currently out of the class of 40 years, everyone who's applied has not even gone past the interview stage. I only know one student has gone to an interview and has gone rejected. He's gone 36 applications plus. I've gone pure rejections. I've not even gone to interesting. I have tried the CV thing. It just told me my CV doesn't work, but didn't tell me properly. I've been using the applications that we told me, but a lot of them are just repeats. Like, for example, Arab has reposted 3 times the same internship, which requires 3 stages of interviews for an internship that is minimum wage. Is there anything that will be done? Because there was a job fair and there was several of the engineering companies dropped out. One of them that appeared here didn't even allow engineers from this uni to be allowed in. They said only IMechE certified universities can be allowed in. And the last thing was, I'm not even joking, 2 people applied to a company that was in a job fair and got rejected within the hour. So is there thoughts on improving how students should get to a career? Because we're just told to apply and there's not much else from that. There's not much teaching on how to get into it.
So 2 things. One is that I think I should leave you and Fiona to talk afterwards, and what you might want to do on your classmates' behalf is invite her or a team to come and work with you. But the idea is, I mean, we do this to an extent already, but the job market is really tough at the moment, and it's been harder this year than it has in previous years. But if we can get you as students working for a company for credit or even better for money while you're doing your degree, then for that company, that's an interview. It might be a 3-month interview or a 3-week interview. And what we know is that after that, companies are much more likely to take you on. So we do some of that, but we have to work all the time to extend the range of it. And our feeling is that perhaps historically, and perhaps for most universities, we've been quite inward looking and we've thought, well, then you graduate, you go out into the big wide world. Now we think we'd better go out ahead and see to what extent we can soften the ground by doing work with companies so that we get better known as an institution, but also getting those links that mean that they're asking for our students. We know, for example, that in life sciences, our students have a much better employment outcome than the University of Edinburgh because they have the lab skills. So the other thing is we can learn from companies what they actually need, and we can then demonstrate that that's in the curriculum, even if it's an unusual thing. But it is the case at the moment that engineering companies aren't recruiting because the cost of construction has gone through the roof. There are no cranes in Edinburgh because at the moment construction companies are just waiting for costs to go down, and that's really difficult, but we can help. I don't have time to go through all that now, but I can leave you with Fiona so you can go through it then.
All right, so thank you so much for engaging with us. We will definitely keep this conversation going, and we'll give you the next dates very soon.
I hope it's been useful. I've enjoyed it. Thanks for your questions. And yeah, I'll come back if you want or not if you don't.